Today is the first PowerPoint on budget. We'll have a second PowerPoint on fee structure, and I will go very into depth on this week's online assignment as well. A sound budget, well used, can also move your program in the direction you have envisioned while helping you maintain the financial integrity of your program. That's from page 50 of The Business of Childcare from the author Gail Jack. I've linked to a couple of her resources previously about policies, procedures, and things like that earlier in the class. It is a fantastic book and I really like it. I think one of the big advantages to it is the budgeting thing. She has a very good way of explaining, and she has a lot of visuals in her book that explain the business of childcare. So if you're somebody who's starting a small business, or you're going to have a lot of financial stewardship in your position, you are keeping the lights on, you are giving people salaries, you need to worry about that, maybe in addition to state and federal funding as well. You should probably check out a book or something similar like this. This PowerPoint is really just designed to give you the primers of creating a budget for childcare. And this is a very, very basic budget. This is just the introduction to budgeting. So if you are beginning your journey into management, this is a good place to start. If you are already running your FCC or your home business or your small business, you are probably a little bit past this, I would hope. You've taken maybe even some budgeting classes at community colleges in order to kind of have that support. In these PowerPoints, we are going to talk about tracking actual expenses, your income. I'm going to define some basic financial and budgeting terms. But if you really are going to have a stewardship, like a financial stewardship role in your organization, you're probably going to need to learn more than this. This is just introducing you to the concepts of budgeting. I do also want to give us some kind of small business tips as well. I think a lot of us are small businesses or have a couple of sites, maybe 3 to 4, not a franchise, not corporate or anything like that. But smaller childcare and smaller in early childhood education programs are really, really vital to the communities that they serve. And they really are small businesses and can be served by small business organizations, Chamber of Commerce's, things like that that are supposed to support business owners as well. So if you are in that position with your FCC or a small program that maybe doesn't have a lot of state funding or alternate sources of funding, you're getting it primarily from tuition and enrollments, please consider also going to small business organizations. You are a small business and you play a really vital role in the community as well. So I just want to talk briefly about the budget cycle and kind of future planning. And that quote that we just heard from Gail Jack earlier, good financial planning helps you with your vision of your program. So you have this way that you want to run your program, how you want to manage your program, and how you want education for young children to be. A good budget and having enough money is really integral and able to do that. If you have all of these fantastic ideas but you don't have the money to do it, you're not going to kind of meet your vision either. So typically what happens is you create a budget to forecast the year ahead. In your budget, and in your budget calendar in this case, you're going to have dates, deadlines, and costs due. So for example, when insurance is due, when liability is due, when human resource cash is due, things like that, that's put into your budget. So months that are going to be a little bit harder to pay the bills, months that you'll have extra cash and you can put it away in savings. Typically, a fiscal period, at least for accounting, is July 1st through June 30th of any particular year, but it really can be any 12-month period. So you can start it January 1st and end it December 31st. It's really up to you. The most important thing is that if you are having a lot of financial planning in your program, you need to have some kind of forecast or system to figure out how and when you're able to pay your bills. Because to a certain extent, you are going to have to communicate that to your staff. I think I talked a couple of weeks ago about planning for your program, knowing, when those insurance bills come due for the actual place that you rent, you might not have a lot of cash that month or just dispendable cash for that month. Letting your staff know, hey, if we're going to do some orders, we've got to do it 3 months ahead of time, or we're going to have to do it after this hits. That's really going to help you in the long run, and that's going to help them plan for their classrooms and what they need as well. Also in a budget, you might want to add what we call a tickler, or something that kind of tickles your memory to remind you to do something within a specific time frame or a certain date. You know, like talking to your accountant, making sure that you're paying Social Security taxes, you know, all that type of stuff typically goes into a budget with ticklers as well. It's a planning tool as well. So you are going to actually plan for your entire year, but then you're actually also as well going to have another budget where you track your actual expenses. So what's literally coming in the door to the penny and what is leaving your doors, typically in salaries as well. And that's typically by month as well, because you can forecast all you want, but if 4 families leave or you get 4 families or something like that, that's going to change your actual future plan. So we have 2 different types of expenses. We have fixed expenses and we have variable expenses. Fixed expenses occur regularly. They typically do not change unless your rent goes up. So that would be your space, the rent or mortgage that you pay, the utilities that you have, your insurance, your taxes, and any kind of like miscellaneous expenses as well. Like if you're putting money into a contingency fund, typically about 10%, so that like if anything goes bad, like you have a leak in your roof, you have some extra cash on hand in order to pay for that type of stuff. Typically, salaries and benefits are fixed as well. All of these can change. Market rates are going to play into it. You know, insurance will go up every once in a while, especially if there's natural disasters, things like that. But for the most part, within a year, you can kind of budget that my rent is always going to be this much. The salaries that I'm going to pay are going to be this much. But then we have variables as well. Transportation costs, marketing costs, any kind of miscellaneous like professional costs that you pay if you have a lawyer, if you have an HR consultant, if you have administrative support as well, janitors possibly, either as independent contractors, consultants, something like that. If you have to pay for field trips, for parent education, for training for staff. And then with supplies, you know, you can typically earmark a certain amount per month that will go to your classrooms, but it might change. Sometimes they'll need more, sometimes they'll need less. Same with your office expenses as well, when you need printer ink, when you need paper, cooking and cleaning as well. And we will talk more about planning for nutrition next week, and that part of that will be budgeting for that. So that's kind of its own beast, let's say. Then equipment and maintenance, you know, your roof doesn't need to be done every year, but maybe every 10 years it does. All of the maintenance that's on your playground, things like that. Sometimes you can forecast and you can put aside a certain amount of money. You can think, okay, I always need $1,000 each year for my playground maintenance. You might need more, you might need less. So it is considered somewhat variable. It doesn't occur all of the time. You don't always have to replace the grass on your playground. And it needs to change accordingly to the need of the program and the wants of the program as well. So what do you want to do? What does your staff want to do? Your biggest expense by far is always going to be staff salaries and benefits. It's always the most. Larger programs might have more staff, obviously more children, more staff working in the classrooms, but you might also be lucky enough to have administrative staff like office assistants, and then support staff, full-time and part-time cooks, janitors, cleaning people as well, which is fantastic. Maybe even drivers for your transportation if you're regularly transporting children as well. Benefits might include healthcare. I know that most programs want to provide healthcare. We want to provide the best salaries for our staff. I've never spoken to anybody in these classes who was like, yeah, no, I just want to pay them real crap. Everybody wants to pay as much as possible. They know that that's key in retaining staff. Same with really great healthcare. It's becoming more and more of a challenge. We're having some political and administrative things within our country that we're starting to work through as well. And then we also have some issues with minimum wages going up as well. It's a good thing. We do need our minimum wage to go up, especially in this field. We need to be able to pay our staff accordingly. This is changing how we can provide healthcare. You are going to have to talk with a human resources and an accountant person to figure out healthcare, how you can provide it, when you can provide it as well. Another benefit might include paid sick time and some kind of retirement, a 401k, an IRA, a Roth. A simple plan is fairly easy sometimes to support as well with your staff as well. So depending on how large your organization is, the more complex your retirement plans can be. As far as paid leave, as of July 2015, 3 days of sick leave are mandatory for all employees, and this must be noted on each pay stub. They will have paid sick leave that you have to indicate on your pay stub. That's the bare minimum. Most places go above and beyond on this. I would say that the industry standard is 2 weeks, and then that's what you kind of start with, and then a lot of programs will also add in days as you kind of hit seniority. So after 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, you know, things like that, you get a certain amount of days or hours added onto that. And that is a really good way to keep retention, as well as to have some more paid time off. It will be part of your budget. That is a cost you're going to have to cover that day off, and then you pay them, but they're not there, so you probably have to have a sub as well, or you're in the classroom, something like that. It is a good way. It should be part of your budgeting when you add those days in, but it's also a really great way to add to staff retention. So I know that all of our programs' long-term goal is to provide health benefits and as much paid time off as possible. Once again, I've never talked to anybody in this field who doesn't want to do that for their employees. At least, I mean, I can't speak to very large organizations, corporate programs, things like that. I don't know those CFOs, but the people who take this class, who have small businesses, FCCs, get state funding, anything like that, want to retain their staff, and they want it to be a really good workplace. This is basically what this whole class is about, providing great education and a great workplace for the people who work with you. But we are having issues with it. There is a fantastic study called High Turnover Among Early Childhood Educators in the US, and it's from childresearch.net. Go ahead and look at that if you want to. It's got some really good information about how little we pay compared to other industries, the effects that has on working families, us being the working families who provide this care for our communities, and how little we are kind of compensated for it. That might be an awesome thing for some of you to check out if that's an area of interest, or once again, you are kind of struggling to meet the needs of every part of the budget in your program. This might help you as well. Some programs also offer reduced childcare costs as an incentive for their teachers. So if you're an infant room teacher but you have a 3-year-old, you get 25% off of your total tuition as a way to keep you and retain you as an incentive as well. That's fantastic. That's another way, in addition to maybe better paid time off, that we can offer our staff to stay in maybe a field that doesn't have the best kind of income for our teachers. You do need to know that that's a monetary value, and that needs to be included in your budget. So in that classroom, you're going to be missing that money that you would have gotten in other ways. Doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. If you can financially provide that for your staff, that's fantastic. It's your choice if you want to do it, but it needs to be included in your budget as kind of a line item of income that you're missing. Okay, and then we're coming to the good part. All of our money is going out. We are getting some money back, and tuition is 100% the largest source. So once again, Gail Jack says, the key to valuable property is location, location, location. We know that in real estate. In childcare, the key to financial viability is enrollment, enrollment, enrollment. Uncollected tuition, late fees, decreased enrollment, those are huge concerns. And if you're making a budget, never count on 100% enrollment every month. You're never going to have that. People leave, people move, especially in North County area, and we're a huge military population in San Diego County as a whole, and then in Riverside counties, and then also in Orange County as well. So basically in the Southern California area, we have a lot of migration. Populations are moving and changing all of the time. Please do not ever kind of assume that you're always going to have, if you have 12 places in 3 of your preschool classrooms, don't expect that all of those spots are going to be filled. Base your budget on having a couple of those spots not filled. If you're able to, fantastic, that's wonderful. Maybe you could even have 15 kids enrolled in that classroom. Some come on Tuesdays, some come on Wednesdays, some come in the evenings, some only come in the mornings, you know, something like that. There are ways that you can have more enrollments in your classrooms while still maintaining your licensing standards. but I wouldn't count on your budget. It's really a forecast, and you shouldn't go with like the most sunny days 100% because you're never going to hit that. Staff scheduling and shifts also really support this goal. It's kind of like, and I will go more into this. So I have school enrollment. So this is just a made-up program. I have 150 students enrolled. I have infants, toddlers, preschool, and then I have a multidisciplinary, multi-purpose room where I have an AM and PM program for kindergartners and first graders. I have my staff available. I have 40 staff members. I have 8 infant teachers, 6 toddler teachers, 9 preschool teachers, 4 before and after school teachers, 1 cook, 1 assistant cook, 1 secretary, and a part-time janitor who comes on the evenings and Saturdays. I've hired a mix of full-time, part-time, and split shift employees. How can I move staff hours to utilize lower and higher enrollment numbers? Can you still provide enough hours for your paid staff if you hire them at a certain amount of hours and they're expecting that and that's part of their paycheck that they depend on for their livelihood? How can you cut or keep hours? Can positions be eliminated or created? Can you get more children in the program from maybe the YMCA, going on referral services? Can I start getting state eligibility? Can I increase my school age program to maybe 3rd and 4th graders? It all comes down to spending time accurately counting your ratios of children, specifically in your early and your late hours. So if I'm open 6 to 6, you know, having those staff do those things that they don't always want to do, but every 15 minutes, how many kids do you have? How many staff members do you have? If you know on some days you're consistently low on enrollment, possibly cutting hours, possibly trying to get more enrollment, shifting teachers from AM, PM programs to infant toddler programs, there's a lot of ways that you can kind of shift your staff around in order to meet the needs of your program. If your children right now are mostly coming in after 8 o'clock, and they're leaving really close to 6, then how can you staff appropriately for that? You might need to shift your staff hours later on so that you're not paying somebody from 6 to 3 when you really need people working until 5:30 because that's when you have most of your things, most of your children. And it could shift back again. And if your program's large enough, probably over 150 students, you're going to have full enrollment all of the time, but you also have a mega center with mega classrooms and things like that. 150 is quite a lot. It's about 40 staff members. I did run a program that was 350 children, infants through an after-school program. The after-school program had about 150 that we had every day. So we had 2 management teams. We had 80 staff members. And so we kind of split it down the middle, 1 management team. We had 1 director, but 2 assistant directors. The 2 assistant directors took 2 teams, and then we had another kind of assistant director as well. That was my position, training and curriculum specialist, really helping with special needs, training staff, curriculum, lesson plans, things like that. So I was mostly in the classroom, challenging behaviors, things like that. The assistant director did a lot of payroll, scheduling, and things like that. We did have 2 separate teams, 2 separate cooks, all united under 1 director who kind of had oversight over both programs. That was a mega center, 350 children is a lot of kids. So it was a fantastic program. I really loved it. But it's a very, very large program as well. Other revenue streams beyond tuition and enrollment, looking at the USDA, once again, we're going to cover that next week. We'll go into the USDA and how we plan for nutrition, how we plan for food service, and how we budget for both of those. Other sources of income might include registration fees. Typically every September or sometime in the fall, you do an additional registration fee to cover materials and costs like that. There could also be materials fees as well, food provisions as well. And then there's soft money sources. I did a lot of this, and I still continue to do a lot of grant writing as a volunteer position for a local unified school district here in Oceanside. So it's not something that my principal or the school district ever counts on that grant money that I'm going to get. We just don't know if we're going to be selected in a grant cycle to get that type of things. Typically, it's kind of an addition to your program. So years ago, I ran a state-funded program, and we did a lot of different grants. I got grants for materials in the classroom, and we got a very large grant from First Five in order to improve our floors and our plumbing that we were having issues with in an older building. It was something that we were actively saving for. We knew the plumbing. It was only a matter of time. We were lucky in that we got this, and we were able to kind of push that money to another project that we really, really needed as well, which ended up being a deck kind of outdoor space where we could do a lot of art and things like that as well. And I think we were even able to put in some sod as well. But it wasn't something that I thought was going to happen that year. It wasn't planned for in my budget, but it came, and it was able to really kind of dramatically change my program as well. Also kind of corporate or business sponsorships as well. At that same program, we had a local business come out. One Saturday, we stayed open the entire day so that they could come in. They painted all of our walls in our infant room, and then they did this really beautiful kind of like sticker mural thing that was really, really gorgeous. In addition to our new floors that we got because of the grant, it really kind of changed the look of the program for the better, which was fantastic in a state-funded program that was struggling a little bit financially. So they're not considered a form of revenue. It's variable, and it really depends on if you win them or if the fundraising ideas go well too. So maybe your parent program wants to do some fundraising. If nobody wants to buy popcorn or magazines or things like that, you really can't always know that you're going to bring in that amount of money. And typically your parent program has earmarked that for things that they want to do, graduations, or kind of like parent enrichment programs. So it's not something that's really going to be recycled into your program that you can use towards salary or things like that as well. So analyzing and balancing your budget. You know money is going out in the form of salaries, and you know it's coming in the form of tuition. At your most basic, you really need to not have a deficit. I mean, you need to be bringing in enough money from subsidies or enrollment in order to meet those salary costs. If you write a budget for an upcoming year, so you're planning for your year and it's going to cost more. So if you're going to send out less than you're bringing in, that's a concern, and you're going to need to rework your budgets again. You should also plan to have a small surplus every year as well, of what we call maybe a contingency plan, 5 to 10% for unforeseen costs that you can kind of have in savings, your rainy day fund, anything like that. In case things were to happen to your program, you could kind of cover some of those costs. If your budget is in the red or has a deficit, you're spending more than you're bringing in, you need to go back to your spreadsheets and your figures, and you need to find areas where expenses can be cut. So maybe cutting from capital improvements, like redoing your playgrounds, so large projects like that. Materials, maybe this is a year where you're really going to have to tighten your belts, and there's not going to be as many material costs as there once were. You're still going to need to be able to cover the classroom. They're still going to need to be able to have sand and art and crayons and radios and things like that, but maybe there's not a lot of the extra things. Maybe we need to look at recycling and loose bits and things like that. You might have to eliminate a support staff position. Nobody really wants to do that. It's terrible when we have to kind of lay off somebody because our program can't financially do it. But I would be remiss if, I mean, I hate that has happened, and I hate that I have had to do that, but I would be remiss in telling you guys only the good parts about budgeting for programs. Sometimes you have to eliminate positions. Typically, we start with support staff. So like office staff, maybe you are going to be the office manager, you're going to be the administrative assistant, and you're the assistant director. That's how programs are. Some programs I worked with, it was me. And the program was open from 7 to 5. And I worked 7:30 to 4:30. There was 2 half-an hours at the beginning and the end. My two infant classrooms had 2 teachers that had these administrative classes. And so those half an hour, 15 minutes before I got to work and when I left at the end of the day, they could cover if they needed to. If licensing was to show up, they had the transcripts and permits for that as well. So they kind of had this degree. Once you've kind of eliminated support staff, janitor, that type of stuff, then you might have to look at, if you're really losing enrollment, or you have to close down a classroom, or the, increasing costs and, the market rates and everything like that are really kind of hitting you. You might need to also look at eliminating a support staff, like a floater, somebody who's in the classroom doing breaks as well. I've also had that as well. I was the director, but I also did lunches and breaks. I only had a little bit of hours in the morning in the beginning of the class when everybody would kind of go out to the playground, and then in the afternoons as well. Anytime breaks needed to be done, our lunches needed to be done, I got out of my office and I had to go do it until we could bring up our enrollment again. The business of childcare, once again, chapter 4 is called the budget, and it has really some good ideas about cutting expenses and walking you through kind of creating spreadsheets for expenses and incomes. So like really great ones, you're totally flush, you have a lot of cash, and then those really, really bad budgets where you don't have enough. So she's got some really good information as well if you're kind of finding yourself in that situation right now. Budget record keeping. Why should you keep financial records? First of all, it's a legal requirement. You need to have some kind of financial records. People could come in. You could be accused of siphoning money, taking money, embezzling, things like that. So you have to do it. And then you have to do it for tax records, for payroll records, and to report to your funding agencies as well. So if you're getting money from an outside source, like state funding or something like that, you need to do that for your funding agency as well. Those who also have management above them are going to report to a governing board, a corporate office, a foundation, or a governmental office as well that's giving you additional funds. The documents that you need to keep checks. So, you know, there's when you write a check, people don't write checks very much anymore, but if you have a small business, you probably do. You need to keep that check information. You need to keep bank statements, billing records, payroll records, fundraising money, especially profit and loss statements, and paid time off statements. All of these are really important. If you're struggling with this, there are accountants who can come out and you can have them on a freelance or consultant basis, and they will help you with putting together a system for paper. And then also right here, I have kind of an example of the computer programs that most of you probably do. So there's Quicken, and there's a lot of kind of things like payroll services and things like that online that do like federal withholding, Social Security, Medicare, state and county withholding, taxes, all that type of stuff. There's a lot of programs online that can really, really help you with this so that you're not having to kind of do it. You can still do it like that old school, but most places have this already set up, and it's probably the kind of your best bet at this point. I talked about especially fundraising money, and that's because I would not, if it's a parent program that is doing the fundraising for you, you need to have some oversight of what they are raising and what they're bringing in and how they're using it. So you probably want to sit in on those meetings, make sure that they're following laws when it comes to that as well. Like typically you can't do raffles unless you have kind of like, especially for PTOs at school districts, there's a lot of legal requirements when it comes to that as well. You also want to make sure that they're not inadvertently using money in the wrong way or spending it on different things. So probably sitting in or having somebody sit in on your parent meetings when they are specifically talking about budget will be really important. So state funding, state and federal funding monies require different requirements. So we know that the California Department of Education has this CDE, Child Development Program. So kind of they're using state funds and federal funds. We have a lot of different contracts, a lot of private agencies who are using this money, a lot of public agencies as well. If you are not getting state funding for children, I would seriously, seriously consider it. It is a great revenue source for programs. It's a lot of programs, corporate programs have now started doing this, Discovery Isle, Children's Paradise, things like that. They are taking state subsidies, state funding as well. The best place to start is the California State Department of Education Funding and Grants Department for some information. We also have the CCRC, the Child Care Resource Center. They will help you become a licensed child care provider. And then how to become, they also have information about becoming a subsidized child care provider. And then CalWorks also has a subsidized program as well. So these links are the best place for you guys in order to start looking at it. I would highly, highly suggest it. It meets another need in our community, and it's a great revenue source. There are additional requirements, additional permits, additional kind of licensing standards that you do have to follow. So you do need to think when you go to these websites, can I have less ratios? Is there going to be a year or two where I transition to these new state funded ratios where I'm going to need to spend a little bit more out in order to retain and get the staff that I need in order to run this program. So it is something that you're going to have to think about, look at, and crunch the numbers as you make this transition. And that doesn't mean that you're only taking subsidized children, but you can take a mix of them. We're also going to learn more about funding sources if you want to. Like I said, you know, you're going to need to crunch the numbers, but the best thing to do, and I don't want to just say crunch the numbers because that's kind of hard. The best thing to do to learn about state subsidized programs is to shadow or work with an enrollment coordinator or an accountant. So like Educational and Enrichment Services Systems here in the North County of San Diego has enrollment coordinators that work very closely with all of the programs. They have quite a few sites. Maybe asking to interview that person or take them out to lunch or just kind of strike up a professional networking, maybe not with EES, but with other larger programs like MAC Head Start, Neighborhood House. There's a lot of different programs that use a lot of different funding streams. Maybe taking that accountant out to lunch or having a professional conversation with him or her will help you learn about how to take advantage of those types of things. Attend conferencing. If there's conferences that have to deal specifically with that, the Child Care Resource Center is a good place to start as well. And then the Department of Education, they have a child development programs as well. So that may be good to go to a conference and learn from these kind of professionals that are offering you this. Work with an accountant. You can get an accountant. You can consult with one. They can kind of be an independent consultant for you, and you can talk to them about this type of stuff, especially if asking around you find one that specializes in early childhood education and subsidy, and there are people who do that. And then work with the accounting or the director within your own organization. So if you're looking to move up out of the classroom, out of an assistant director position, out of a site supervisor and into a program director position, then asking the higher ups right above you, hey, I'd really like to learn more about financial stewardship. I'm not doing it a lot in my current position, and I'd really like to move up in my chain of command. What can I do to learn more about the financial aspects of this job? So maybe they'll have you go to the accounting department. Maybe they'll have you assist with the director, something like that. Because a lot of, and this kind of, I found this graph over here, 6 out of 7 children eligible for subsidized childcare did not receive services from the state, and this is from California. So we have children that are eligible that are not getting those services. Some of it is that the parents are not aware that they could get those type of services, and otherwise, and other times, it's programs are not offering these services for families. All right, then we have federal funding as well, and this is typically from like the Office of Head Start, so I've linked to them. But we also have within the Administration for Children and Families, there's the Office of Child Care, and they have some great information as well about federal funding streams. Head Start, Early Head Start, and Migrant Education receive their funds from the federal government as well, and if you are one of those, you're most likely receiving funds from the federal government. The military child care system also receives funds from the federal government, but from the Department of Defense, and their employees are civil service and non-appropriated funds, which is kind of its own supervisory population. And it's typically a division of MCCS, which is the Marine Corps Community Service. So they are federal, but they are within military installations as well. If you are in the community, you can work for them. You get passes to come on base, you get decals, all of that type of stuff. It is a good place to learn more about administration as well. So if you live near a military installation like March Air Force Base, Camp Pendleton, I don't know why that, and then Miramar, and then I'm trying to think of there's another one around here that I'm totally blanking on. But those are good places to look for work that maybe are not as readily thinkable to us in this industry. Then there's a startup costs as well. A possible difficulty in starting your own program is you don't have a starting point. So like when you're budget forecasting for an established program, you know how much generally you spent last year. And you can use that to help you forecast what next year is going to be like. You're not going to have that starting off point, so you're really going to have to estimate costs on kind of what you do know. So if you know that you're going to have 3 preschool rooms with 1 teacher and 12 children, this is going to tell you how much money you're going to be bringing in from enrollment and tuition, and then how much money you're going to be spending on 3, possibly 4 to 5 teaching positions as well. So this is where you estimate kind of the bare bone cost of salary and tuition. And then also rent, you're possibly going to have to pay rent and mortgage, basic insurance, and then cost to supply your classroom as well. You're going to have to get chairs and tables and rugs. And it can be bare bones at the beginning, but you're eventually going to have to add to it as well. So you're going to need some kind of actual physical budget. I showed you examples of like Quicken, which is a fantastic program that many of us use to keep your books or the kind of records that you have going really well. And they typically also have a part for doing taxes and incomes and things like that for the salary of your staff. They're based on the idea of Excel, which is kind of a Microsoft program, and that is how I do my budgets, is on Excel, and because that's the easiest thing for me. And then when I was doing payroll, it was on Quicken or some of the online pay systems that I had that made pay stubs for my staff. If you're part of a larger organization, federal, corporate, state, and military, you are going to have additional paperwork, submitting claims, income and expenses. There's various departments, boards, and subsidy programs that you're also going to have to submit and keep paperwork for as well. So how do you communicate the budget with other people? You need to possibly report to another funding source, once again, your board or the state and the federal government. As an employer, you have to communicate your benefit policy and pay agreements with staff in writing. So you need to tell them what their benefits are, how many days off they get, and then their pay agreement, part of their job contract as well. And their rate of pay, their leave benefits, so how much time off they have paid still available to them, and their pay information, including how much was withholded from like federal and state government, has to be available on every pay stub. That's why most programs use some kind of online system in order to do it, to keep it easy for you, so you're not always having to calculate that yourself. An administrator also has to communicate in writing with parents about tuition costs. So you're going to also have a child care contract with your families. It's going to include fees, when tuition is due, when they're considered late, when disenrollment will happen because they have not paid, when the auxiliary costs are due, registration fees, enrollment fees, possible material fees. You're going to need to Google examples. There's fantastic examples. I have one right here. And it's got parent responsibilities. So this is, and we'll talk more about, I talk more about this in 155. Parents need to be respectful and polite in classrooms. I'm providing a service for you. You are providing me money, but you can't be rude about it. I also have hours of operation, basic rates, and when you're going to pay them, when things are late, when I will kick you out of my program. And I have had to do this. I hate to do it. I always try to give families a financial way that they can do it. Talk to a financial consultant, talk to Go Get Cow Fresh. You know, if they're really struggling financially, I try as much as possible to help them with that, but I have had to kick people out. I am running a business. At the end of the day, if you cannot pay me for childcare, then you're going to need to go somewhere else. Or if you physically cannot pay for it, even with subsidies, even with Cow Fresh, even with that type of stuff, you know, if you can't pay the childcare that you're supposed to, I can't provide this service for you. I can't do education for free. That's not how our system is kind of based right now. Then return checks when we're closed, if possible, and you know that. And then I always put a really small one on illness. All of this stuff I would also put in our parent handbook, which we will write, but I do put some of it in my child care contract as well, because it's really important. Like, I'm going to kick you out if you're rude. I'm going to kick you out if you're not paying, and I'm going to kick you out if you consistently bring your child when you know they're sick or have lice or things like that. So the things that would end the contract between you, put on that contract. So it's very much up to you. If illness is not something that you would kick a family out for, you know, maybe consider not putting it on your child care contract. We won't have time to write this in this class, but there are fantastic examples online. And then you can also talk to an HR or legal representative too, to make sure that it's really airtight. So in conclusion, having a working budget for a fiscal year allows supervisors to make decisions. It allows you to look ahead, to know that you're going to be able to pay your staff, and also to meet the goals of your program. At the end of the day, for you that are FCC or small businesses or not having a lot of state subsidies and things like that, or not in a very large organization, you are responsible for the livelihood of your staff. Your staff is a working person who is depending on you for that salary so that they can meet their own needs of rent and food as well. We're also meeting the needs of families that need childcare every day so that they can go ahead and work as well. So we play a vital part part in our communities. It's a tremendous responsibility, and that means that if you are responsible for the financial aspects of your program, you need to have a big attention to detail, and you need to craft and draft a budget, possibly with help from other people, in order to make sure that you can continue to meet the needs of your staff and the families who depend on you. All right, this is number 1 of 2. The next one will be specifically about fee structures and our online assignment for this.